Good evening, everyone. Welcome to your latest Wolves Fancast episode. I'm your host, Little Dan. On tonight's special episode, we'll be discussing and hopefully giving you a bit more insight to, hopefully, the incoming head coach at Wolves, Vitor Pereira. We announced that we were going live at 7 p.m. around midnight last night in the hope that Wolves would have announced it this morning, but for some reason or other, Wolves are keeping us on their toes. Hopefully, negotiations have gone swimmingly, and today's coaching session with Vítor with the players has all gone well as we lead up to the weekend's game away to Leicester. On tonight's show, obviously, I've got with me the inimitable Stu Hall.
Oh, hello, everyone.
And a special guest from Portugal, football expert, author of the world-renowned book, Bring Me That Horizon, Miguel Pereira. How are you, Miguel?
Thank you for having me, Dan. I'm delighted to be here and talk about a man that brought me many joys as a football supporter, because I am a Porto supporter where Vítor had the highlight of his career almost more than a decade now. So it's always good to talk about a person like him who represents much of what the Portuguese manager has been over the past 10, 15 years worldwide.
We look forward to hearing everything that you say tonight. I think I'm part of a group that is actually very excited for how this is going to turn out. With the way that Wolves are, it could go one of two ways, but hopefully it's very positive. But for the viewers that aren't aware of Bring Me That Horizon, just give us a bit more of an insight into your knowledge of Portuguese football.
Well, basically, I'm a journalist and a writer. I've published almost 10 books now, both in Portugal and Spain. I lived in Madrid for 16 years. And last year I published this year, actually in January, I published this one with Pitch Publishing, because basically there were no books in English about Portuguese football, which always seems odd to me as a writer and as someone that usually bought hundreds of football books about everywhere in the world. But Portugal being such an important nation to football, especially over the last 25, 30 years, I say, there were no really books that people in English could look upon to know more about the managers, the players, the football clubs, the national team. So Pitch publishes this one in January. Things went pretty well. And basically it gives a little bit of a glimpse and a window to people who want to know more about Portuguese football, stories, characters, the whole sort of it. And it's actually doing pretty good on sales-wise, so I'm very happy with it.
He's muted again. He does this every week.
Every episode. Hopefully we'll get you some more sales on the back of this. You can find Miguel's book at www.pitchpublishing.co.uk/shop/bring-me-horizon. Miguel, we were discussing about having you on the show. I think it was either Monday or Tuesday night, but you were at the Porto fixture. Talk about sort of how Wolves are still perceived within Portugal after the influx since the days of Silas to Ruben Neves, Diogo Jota, so forth. How Wolves still perceived in Portugal?
Well, there's a very good connection, especially because of Jorge Mendes, of course. Over the past, I would say, almost 15 years now, has been one of the key elements in Wolves coming back to the Premier League and then staying in the Premier League, being competitive, playing beautiful football at times. A doorway for Portuguese managers and players around the years. So, of course, Wolves is very well known in Portugal nowadays. I remember I fell in love with Wolves in 1990 during the World Cup because of Steve Bull. Back in the day, you don't have satellite television, so I was very young and I loved that England national side. Portugal back in those days weren't going anywhere, basically, regarding international football. So everyone had to pick up a second team. Mine was England, and I remember that team very well. And when I found out that there was a player there with a characteristic of them playing at a side that was also the main or one of the main responsibles for the birth of the European Cup, which is now 100 years since the match against Onvet. And what a beautiful shirt you have from the celebration of those crazy 90 minutes at the Molino. And since then, Wolves has become part of my life as a football supporter. And in Portugal, like I said before, having players of such high standards like João Moutinho or Ruben Neves or Pedro Neto over the years, now still with Nelson Semedo and Totti Gomes as well, players who are internationals. People learn to know more about the football club, about its history, about the community. And one of those clubs that people search for highlights during the weekend because of the massive importance that it has, especially regarding the national side, because there are always players from the national side that are at Wolves or have been in Wolves over the past few years.
It's great. Just give a quick couple of sentences on your thoughts on Fabio Silva's tenure at Wolves, just quickly.
Well, basically, I remember the first time I saw Fabio play, he had like 15, 16 years old, and it was very clear that he was going to be a top striker. But I think he moved too soon. I think he should have stayed at Porto at least a couple of seasons to mature as a football player, both physically, both tactically and mentally. And he was thrown back to the Wolves literally too soon in his career. And we have seen over the past couple of seasons that he has matured a little bit. And now this season at Las Palmas is absolutely being a devilish striker that the club from the Canary Islands desperately needed. So I think Fabio will become a very good striker. And I think he was more a victim of the circumstances that took him from Porto to Wolves at 17, 18, I think he had at the time that he signed for the club. And if he had moved with 20 years old, I think it would be a much more all-round player, and Wolves would benefit more from having them than right now.
Hopefully, Wolves spent a lot of money on Fabio, so hopefully he can repay some of that value one day, but it's looking more and more unlikely by the day. Let's talk about the hopefully new incoming head coach at Wolves, Vitor Pereira. Quick some stats there on screen. Clubs managed 10, trophies won 8, a win percentage rate for all those that love those percentages, 53%, goals scored per game, 1.8, goals conceded per game, 1.1. What's your sort of first initial thoughts on Vitor Pereira, Stu?
I mean, as with everyone else, all I knew about him was the Everton stuff. And that's come back to bite him, didn't it? Eventually with the Lampard situation not being exactly as I thought it was going to end up. But the more I dug into him, and you look at all the now infamous clip from the first time he was in Saudi, I'm presuming was that 2013-14, when he's having that rant on the table. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. From what we've had over the last 6-7 months of Gary O'Neill, it was almost like anyone but him, and especially in the last 4 games, which have been a joke, as we've been over and over again. But to go from someone like Gary O'Neill, who's like the player's friend, and I said this in the group chat the other day, didn't I? That it seems like with Gary O'Neill, it was, well, the players all love him because it's like when you have a supply teacher at school, you all know that you're not going to have anything to do all day. It's going to be a great laugh, but nothing's going to get achieved. And yet you get someone like this in who, on the face of things, looks like he doesn't take any prisoners. He's very much in the Jose Mourinho mold. I know Miguel's going to go into this in a bit, but brilliant. We've wanted this for a long, long time. We need some discipline. This squad is a joke in terms of that. So if he's the man to do it, great. If not, if it all goes tits up and it all goes spectacularly wrong, then we can embrace that as well. But at least it's not Gary O'Neill, which is the main point.
Yeah, I think it did get to that stage, didn't it? Gary O'Neill earlier on in the season repeated numerous times that we had unfavourable start with our fixtures, and November, December time it would turn to more favourable fixtures. But out of those fixtures, it's just gone very, very terribly wrong. Miguel, can you just give a bit of us an insight into Vitor Pereira, the man, before the footballing side comes into it?
Yeah, basically, it really surprised me that they took too long in replacing O'Neill, because one of the things that is important is Vitor Pereira is a guy that looks at projects on medium, long term, more than short term. And now the fixtures that he'll have over the next few months will be the toughest on the calendar. And they lost a good opportunity, because as the man entering in that dominion, he is a very straightforward guy. He's a very working class. He was born in Espinho, which is a town by the sea of a fishing community, like 20 minutes south of Porto. So he grew up in a very humble background, and he spent most of his career coaching on the youth system of Porto until he started to coach as a main coach back in 2003-04 with local clubs. Then he moved to the Azores, and every single step he took was a step taking the certainty that he had ideas, very strong core values. He's a guy that demands a lot of work ethics. He always says that the most important player are the intelligent player. And the second most important player are the player that respect the manager because they believe in the manager. They believe he has a plan for them. And even if they are not able to see it at first sight, in the long run, they should get the benefits from the idea that he wants to bring up. So in that sense, he's a guy very straightforward to everyone, to the management, to the players, to the press, and to supporters. And that has brought him a sort of football career different to what one might expect when he won his second league back-to-back title at Porto. Because back in the day, he was one of the hottest flavors in Portuguese football. And many would expect that he would move to the Premier League like Villas-Boas, who was the manager before him, did, or other Portuguese managers who were moving to other leagues. But he never wanted to take a step that didn't believe in. He always wanted winning projects, or at least projects that do believe in him, and at least were able to respect the way he thinks, the way he thinks that football should be played, the way he thinks that the backroom should be managed, and the way he thinks that there is an ethic of values that will be respected while he's at the football club. And that's why he had a stranger career, because he had a lot of opportunities to move to different clubs, but he didn't felt that the ambience was correct. He didn't felt that there was the right conditions for him to do his job properly. And he went under the radar for a lot of time after he left for Greece and then Turkey. He played in the second division of Germany because he was shown a project that was prepared to bring 1860 München back in the Bundesliga. And when he got there, he discovered he was basically conned. So it was an experience that he says that he learned a lot from it, because he started to understand more about the way the boardrooms and the football agents work on the shadows. And he is a man that prefers not to be in a certain position or in a certain job and stay true to his values than someone who accepts every single job that comes to him and then eventually we'll see how it goes. So it took that long to reach the Premier League also because of that. And I think it's a good add to Wolves because, as you said, you need a guy that has those strong values, a guy that's going to implement a more disciplined mindset, similar to what Amorim is trying to do at Man United, another football club who has been a total shambles in terms of ethics and discipline. And Vitor Pereira is much similar to that, a guy that really wants to create a sense that everyone is going to have to be worthy of playing, and nobody wants to be friends of the manager. They have to respect the manager. They have to understand that he's the leader, that is the guy who's going to take the hard decisions, and is the one that knows when the ship will get to harbour safely.
I'm buying into all this, Stuart. We've got one quick comment from Steway89, Miguel. Vitor sounds like an aggressive Nuno. What's your thoughts on that? Because there does seem to be quite a lot of similarities. It does seem to be a coach who is all about building a chemistry within the dressing room, and whatever happens outside that, it's sort of like a siege mentality, if you will.
Yeah, but I think Nuno is a more relaxed manager in that sort. I think Victor is more intense. He's more intense with himself, with the players, with the press, with the fans. And tactically, they are two very different managers as well. So despite they have similar traits, and that's almost a characteristic of Portuguese managers, they really want to create football cultures within the dressing room. They want to create an us against them, like Mourinho did when we arrived at Chelsea. It's a very popular idea in Portugal that to thrive, you have to be against the world, basically. Portuguese managers are not by default like, I would say, Dutch or Spanish that go all for tactics and we have to create a blueprint based on a similar tactical system. They are more into creating synergies and creating a relationship between the good culture in the dressing room and also tactical principles that they want to establish, but not being too fundamentalistic about it.
Happy with what you're hearing, Stu?
I mean, beyond the scenes, I mean, not just that. I mean, there you go, Miguel. I've ordered your book already. There you go. I said to Dan earlier, it's been in my watch list for all year, and it's like I'm just going to take the plunge now. There you are. You've sold it to me as well. He sounds like someone said there, an aggressive Nuno, and I'm more excited now than I was 15 minutes ago. I mean, bear in mind, I'm even considering going to Newcastle on a Wednesday night now because it sounds like exactly what we need. And on that, Miguel, why do you think it is that the Portuguese I know it's kind of the generalization, but the whole work ethic thing, and is it because of the way Portuguese footballers are brought up? Is it a generalization to say that they come from working class backgrounds and they work their way up that way? Is that the kind of the mentality bred into them early on? Is that
No,
fair to say?
it's basically because Portuguese football is in the periphery of Europe, basically. So if you want to succeed, you had to be very good. You have to be better than the other guys because you have no money. If you compare the budget of every Portuguese football club, even the top ones, even Porto, Benfica, and Sporting, it's inferior to clubs that are in the Championship. So if you really want to be competitive in Europe and you want to create a winning dynasty, the first step is create a good atmosphere in the dressing room and a sense that, oh, we are in it together or this is not going to work out. And at the same time, Portuguese football has worked over the last few decades as an importer of talent from South America mainly, and also develop of youth systems. So basically, the players that come from the youth ranks, they need to be prepared to be in professional football. They need to absorb those kinds of values because playing in the youth setups and playing the professional leagues is not the same. So they are there for the taking. They are there for managers to work them as men as well as players. And if you bring a lot of under 20 talented players from Brazil, from Argentina, from Colombia, who also had a total different experience as a players playing in South America than they will have in Europe, then you also have to create that idea. So if you pick up some veteran players who share the same core values that you have a manager who wants to imprint on your team, and then you get all these youth together, you know that for this to work, you need to create a very good, a very strong dressing room culture. Because tactically you can be very good, but the players will commit a lot of mistakes because they're young or because they come from different realities like South American football. So you need to be prepared for that. And at the same time, how you defend yourself from that situation with the good dressing room, with people that assume their mistakes, with people who are veterans who take a step up and try to raise their game, try to protect the youngster, help them to grow up. And that's something that is mostly common as a trait in Portuguese managers, because that's the reality they have to face, even if they don't leave Portugal to other leagues. And of course, when they do, they bring all that knowledge and all their experience and they try to replicate in a world where the budgets of the football clubs are much bigger, so they have the probability to buy or at least not to sell certain players that they know in Portugal that they will have to sell. And Vitor Pereira is a great example of that, because when he started to work as Porto manager, Porto was starting to sell their top players. Falcao was sold 2 weeks after he took up the club, and in the following year he had to sell to James Rodriguez. So they are used to lose talent because they know they have to prepare the next one in line, and that creates a need to be very focused on your day-to-day work and also creating that culture in the dressing room, because they know that their star player is not going to be here next year. So you cannot depend on him exclusively. You have to depend on the group, on the dressing room culture.
He sounds perfect for this club.
He really does. Let's talk about the period in charge at Porto. You've mentioned losing Falcao really into his reign, losing James Rodriguez, which makes it even more special. The 2 years that he had in charge, especially his second season, which did he go unbeaten, or was he just like lost one or something like that?
No, he was unbeaten for all season, and he won the league on the penultimate match at the last minute against Benfica at home, which is, for me as a football supporter, the greatest moment in my life. I remember, because Porto that year draw, I think, 5 or 6 matches and won all the other matches. When Benfica came to Porto to play the penultimate match of the season, they were 1 point ahead. So a draw would suffice for them to be champions, because on the last run, everybody knew that both Porto and Benfica would win their respective matches. So it was a showdown between the two, but Benfica had the upper hand. And there wasn't even the possibility that if Benfica would win, they would be champions at Porto Stadium, which was like the worst thing possible, especially because 2 years before, Porto was champion at Benfica Stadium. So they wanted to pay back from that. And Benfica was winning at first, and the Porto draw. And in the dying minutes, players that Vitor Pereira brought from the bench, who is also a good trait on him. He knows how to move things around from the bench. He's not a reactive manager. He always has a B plan. And in those moments, it worked. A Brazilian youngster that came from the youth ranks called Kelvin scored a goal in the 92nd minute. And basically, the stadium went bonkers, and Porto surpassed Benfica in the table, and then they won the league the following week. And one thing that explains what Vitor Pereira really is what happened that night, because he was going to be replaced by Paulo Fonseca, who is now manager of AC Milan, which was doing a very good season with Passos Ferreira, a very small club who finished third. And after winning the league, Porto chairman at the time, Pinto da Costa, he said, no, we have to renew contract with you because you won back-to-back league champions, so I have to renew. And Vitor Pereira said, no, no, thank you. I know that you're negotiating in my back with Paulo Fonseca. I know that you have everything done with him. Don't come to me and offer me an extension of a job just because I was champion. Because for a goal that went in the 92nd minute, or a goal that didn't went in the 92nd minute, that shouldn't be sufficient to value my work. So a guy that could have stayed in Porto for 1, 2, 3 seasons, play Champions League football, preferred to say, no, I'm going to Greece or Turkey or wherever, but I'm not going to stay at a football club that wasn't ready to trust on me to stay here for a third season, only because there was another manager doing a very great season below me, and you were expecting me to lose the league. So that explains a lot of what he is as a football manager and as a person as well.
Does that sound bonkers or admirable to you, Stu?
The guy sounds like he's got principles. That's all I want. And if he's willing to do that, and as let me get, was he a Porto fan as growing up?
Yeah, yeah. He was a hardcore Porto fan, and he had worked for like 6 or 7 years in the Porto youth setups before he started his career as manager. So he coached a lot of under 12, 14 players for several years. Then he started his career. He went to Santa Clara. It was a club that was in the second division. Now they play on the first division, but back in the time they were in the second division in the Azores Island. And then Porto hired André Villas-Boas, who had been like a scout for Jose Mourinho, both at Porto and at Chelsea, and then decided to start a career as manager. He only had 1 season in his career. So Pinto da Costa was the Porto chairman, said, okay, I will hire you, but since you have no experience, I will bring Vitor Pereira as your number 2. And he offered Vitor Pereira the possibility, says, I know you're already a manager at your football club in the second division, but what about being the number 2 of Villas-Boas? You take care of the tactical things, because Villas-Boas was never a good manager on the tactical aspects of training. You do that, and then when Villas-Boas goes out, you take on him. And Vitor Pereira accepted to give a step back in his career, basically, because he could have been the main manager of any Portuguese first division league over the season. So he accepted. He, in a sense, diminished the power of his ego to be the number 2 of a guy that had less experience than he had, thinking on the long run into the future. And when Villas-Boas was at the end of that season, which was a remarkable season, because that season Porto won the championship with more 12, 13 points than Benfica. They won the cup and they won the Europa League final. So they won all single competition. And then Villas-Boas moved to Chelsea in the following summer, and Vitor Pereira got the job. And then he won back-to-back leagues with only 1 defeat in 60 matches, which was absolutely crazy.
And then for that backstory to then walk away on your principle, I love this man. He's going to be a hero regardless of what happens. I can just feel it now.
There's a bit of a Walter Zenga vibe here in regards to it might be chaotic. I think there will be huge moments. It's just whether he can break away from that line to being a successful coach. Because obviously Nuno had many chaotic moments. I mean, that Bristol City away game where he's celebrating wildly in the the corporate section after being sent off is up there. But was there any notable players that came through at Porto for Villas-Boas or Mourinho during Vitor Pereira's time in the academy area?
Well, basically, a lot of the players that he then made up when he was a main manager were coached by him in the under 14s and in the under 12s. I think, for instance, you had Castro, now plays in the B team, who had a long career at Porto. Sergio Oliveira as well, who was a Portuguese international and played for Porto, played under him in the under 14s. There were a couple of other internationals, but when he got the first job as manager of Porto after Villas-Boas left, it was in a time that Porto wasn't giving really much of importance to their youth setups. It was even higher because of that, because they wanted to have a coach that would focus more on youth kids. But then the generation that he got, that he could have been bringing talent to the first team, was not really good, actually. So he usually played with the same guys all over again. He spent the entire season when I think 85% of the players were 16 within the squad. He didn't want to take too many chances, because he's also a manager that focuses much in control. For him, football is all about control. He likes the excitement once in a while, but for him, you have to be able to control the game, have the ball all of the time, and dictate the tempo and press the opponent, but with the ball on your feet, not just running up and down like crazy. And for that, he wanted to have players that would be comfortable on the ball. So there were no too much youth players except for Oliveira, who came up with under him for the team back in those years.
You know, you mentioned there, Miguel, on these how he wants to play the ball at feet. How is he with playing out from the back? Because it's a bugbear of mine. Everyone knows that, and the Molyneux crowd is not one to be patient with this kind of thing, like the woke football meme and that kind of stuff. Is he one to embrace this style of let's pass it back to the goalkeeper all times, or is he more of a common sense first kind of guy?
Yeah, he's a common sense guy. Like I said before, Portuguese managers differ to the Dutch or the Italian or the Spanish in the sense they are more orthodox in their approach. He wants to have control, but he also wants to understand the crowd, and he wants to understand that he plays differently from where you are. And he also is a man that's seen the world. He has been in Asia, he has been in South America, he has been in Europe, he played the Champions League. So you know that football has different sensibilities and different realities. For instance, when he was playing at Corinthians, who has like crazy supporters, one of the craziest in the world, they expected every time the team gets a ball to end up with an attack, to end up with a shot on goal, because having the patience to build up was not what they wanted. But then he moved to Flamengo, who is a club that focused more on artistry. So they can accept that a player loses a ball if they tries to nutmeg an opponent, because it's more within the Rio culture. And he spoke lengthily about it. The difference of cultures in the football club is also very important for a manager to triumph. Because yes, he can have his own ideas, he can have his own philosophy, but he has to understand where he is and what the fans expect and what the players are used to. Of course, if you look to the squad that Wolves has now, there's a lot of South American players, there are a lot of Portuguese players, so players that will understand them tactically wise and philosophically wise. But he also wants, is part of his work to connect deeply with the supporters. So he knows that if he starts to play like Guardiola in his first matches and the stadium goes against him because they want a more aggressive style of football or a more attacking-minded football, he will try to adapt and search for points of common sense between the tactical approach that he wants to implement, which is all about control, that's his trademark, but also with the culture of the place where he's in.
Something for Wolves fans to think about in the hopefully near future. You were speaking moments ago about footballers that are calm and intelligent with the football. There's a picture there with Vitor Pereira and João Moutinho, still massively adored in Wolverhampton. But something for Wolves to think about in the near future. Where did it go for Vitor Pereira wrong in the European competitions, Miguel?
Well, basically, he had an issue in the first season, because when he got the job after Villas-Boas left and Porto, like I said, had won the treble, a lot of the players want to move out. Of course, when you win the Europa League and you are in a league like Portugal, you had all the clubs in bigger leagues searching for your better players. So Porto received offers for everyone, basically, and everyone wanted to leave because all the offers for the player were very good in terms of wages, in terms of bonuses. So the club had to take hard decisions, players that were sold, like Falcao, for instance, other players that had to stay in, like Moutinho, like James in the first season. And that created a sense of disruptiveness in the backing room. So the first months of Vitor Pereira, while he was trying to get on grips with the squad, turning also the position to be the assistant to manager is always difficult, because you have been known from the squad in the previous season to be the number 2, but now you're number 1. You have to exert your new power within the same players that weeks before you were speaking in a very different manner because you were not the main manager. So that thing is always difficult. And Porto had a bad luck in the draw for the group stage on that first season, and things went bad. Then they went to the Europa League and they lost against Man City, which was not a great Man City side. But Porto, back in the day, they were more focused on winning the league. So they decided that to be again in the Europa League didn't bring too much for the team, but winning the league would, because basically it's not just winning another title, but also booking a place for the Champions League of the following season. And in the following season, Porto actually did very good, but they lost against Malaga in the last 16 by a stroke of bad luck, a sent-off of Belgian international Steven Defoe on the return match against Malaga was dreadful, because Porto, in the first leg, they played beautifully. They missed a lot of very good opportunities to kill the match. They won 1-0 at home, and they controlled every single thing that happened on the pitch in the return leg at Malaga, right until the moment that Defoe was off. And when he was sent off, Porto already had 2 substitutions done. So there was not much a possibility to change things from the bench. And Malaga went after Porto and routed by a very good squad. It was a squad that had Van Nistelrooy, that had Isco, that had Joaquin, that had Toulalan, top of great players. They won 2-1, and basically Porto went out for just simply 1 goal. But I think if Porto hadn't gone through and played the quarterfinals against Dortmund, there was a very good chance that side could have reached at least the semi-finals of the Champions League. And it was just a shame that the full red card halted that possibility.
How is Vitor Pereira still perceived from Porto fans? Obviously, he had 2 amazing seasons in charge there. Mm-hmm. Has there ever been a possibility that he would have returned in the period since he's left at all?
Well, basically, if I'm thinking this summer, people wanted him to come back. So Sérgio Conceição was a Porto manager for 7 years. He moved out this summer. They put this number 2, Vitor Bruno, in charge. And there was a lot of people that wanted him to come back in the summer because basically Villas-Boas now is Porto chairman. So the guy who worked with him in the first year. So people started to believe that there was a good possibility with him as chairman to bring Vitor Pereira back, because Vitor Pereira, of course, left the club in bad terms with the former president, Pinto da Costa. And once you're on bad terms with him, you never have the chance to come back to the club. But with Villas-Boas, people believe that there was a good opportunity to rescue Vitor Pereira from being on South America or in Saudi Arabia and bring him back to reestablish Porto dominance in Portuguese football, because the squad that Porto has now is very similar to the ones that Vitor Pereira likes. A lot of midfielders that know how to control the game, play the ball, fast wingers, defenses that can also play the ball comfortably on their feet. So there was a possibility, but then in the end, there was an issue with the release clause with Al Sharp, and Porto, basically they have no money to spend now. So there was the low-cost decision to bring Vitor Bruno as main manager during the summer. But even now that there have been some matches where Porto has been playing poorly, and a lot of supporters before the announcement that Vitor could move to the Premier League were starting to think that if Vitor Bruno got the sack, then eventually Vitor Pereira would be signed in. So basically, you are stealing the manager that Porto supporters wanted it for their team, or at least a group of Porto supporters wanted for their team, because they have very good memories of him.
That's the episode title line right there, isn't it? Wolves steal Porto's desired manager. Thanks for everyone that's joining myself, Stu and Miguel on tonight's show. There's plenty of comments. We appreciate you. It's over 1,200 people, including people watching on Twitter tonight. There's over 100 of you on YouTube watching live. Please press the like button. It would really help us gain a bit more exposure to the channel, because we're lacking beyond a few of other channels. RJ in the comment section, this guy's knowledge is incredible. Sativa, Breeder, RJ, I agree, great guest. Miguel is excellent. His English is better than mine. Just to reiterate what we advertised earlier, Miguel has his own book out. Well, he's got many books out, but you can find his latest one at www.pitchpublishing.co.uk/shop/bring-me-horizon. It's basically a journey through the soul of Portuguese football. I brought it yesterday on the Kindle. You can get it in hardback copy. I'd implore you to go and get it.
$11.99 on Amazon.
I mean, it's money well spent, Miguel. Thank you for joining us on tonight's show. We're just going to have a quick ad break for our audio listeners. Then we're back to go in a bit more in depth into Vitor Pereira's coaching career. Thank you for coming back so quickly to the Wolves Fancast special episode, where we're offering you insight into hopefully the new Wolves head coach, Vitor Pereira. Wolves, the clock is ticking. I've got work tomorrow. I want that announcement online before I go to bed. Right, let's go a bit more in depth into Vitor Pereira's coaching career. Most recently, he's been head coach at Al Shabab. Had a couple of stints at 2 clubs in Brazil, Miguel, starting off at Corinthians before going to Flamengo. There's a bit of, you mentioned it earlier, that there was a bit of stickiness between him leaving Corinthians to join Flamengo, talks of an illness with Vitor Pereira's mother-in-law before joining Flamengo. Give us more of an idea about that, please.
Yeah, basically, I think when you see the list of clubs that Vitor Pereira manages, you get the sense that who this guy who has been managing all around the world when he's supposedly to be managing Portugal or in England or in Spain or France or whatever. And he was very honest about it. We've talked before about his principles, and one of the things that he really understood soon is that if I want to take the right decisions and pick up the right jobs, I need to have financial independence. So we've talked about his humble origins, and it is very humble. All the people that live in Espinho, where he's come from, very humble working class background. So he went to Saudi Arabia after leave Porto for the money, and he was very blunt about it. He said, I want to give my family the money that they need, so I need to accept a job that they pay well. It's more important for me now than just be trying to get something over my ego and try to coach some clubs that can take me to win some titles. First, I have to finance the future of my family. Then he moved to Greece and Turkey with projects that he believed would be more interesting. He won the league at Greece. He came second in Turkey. And then, like many football managers in Portugal, he went to Brazil. Brazil, over the last 6 or 7 years, have become a place where Portuguese managers come and triumph very easily because there is a lack of tactical knowledge in Brazilian managers for a long time. And you can see that there's never good Brazilian managers coaching in Europe. You see how Brazil is nowadays. And for people like us who grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, and Brazil was like the best thing that had in football, not only in terms of quality players, but even tactically, they always had interesting managers. But that trend ended more than 10, 15 years ago. So nowadays, even middle-class Portuguese managers go to Brazil and win leagues and win continental competitions. You have, for instance, now Arthur Jorge, who was coaching Braga, which is Portugal's fourth club, has just won the Libertadores and the league with Botafogo. Abel, who was the manager at Palmeiras, who also won the Brazilian League and the Libertadores twice. Jorge Jesus, who was also one of the greatest rivals of Vitor Pereira, won the Libertadores with Flamengo. So basically, Brazilian clubs started to look for Portuguese managers to create winning projects. And Corinthians, which is probably one of the most supported football clubs in the world, brought Vitor Pereira in. But during the season, money simply went out. And basically, they started very well the season. They were fighting for honors. Then they had a little backslash in the end because I suppose there were salaries not being paid to some important players who were on high wages. And they ended up finishing the league fourth, and they lost the Recopa final, which is like the Europa League of South America. And then Vitor Pereira said, I've been out of Portugal for too long. I've been in Asia earning my money. I've been in Turkey. I've been in Greece. And now I've been in Brazil. So I need to get back to my family because while he's traveling around the world, his family stayed in Portugal. So he was homesick. He was always talking about not seeing his sons grow up as teenagers. And also he had his mother-in-law, I think, with cancer. So the family was having a hard time. And he decided with his staff not to stay with Corinthians and move back to Portugal. But then there was a week between the end of the league when he communicated that to Corinthians that he would not renew his contract and he would go back to Portugal to take a sabbatical year. And Flamengo came with a monumental economic offer for him to move to Rio de Janeiro. And then he talked with his wife and he decided to accept it. But all his staff said no. His staff said, we are tired of traveling around the world. We just want to go back. So he went to Flamengo without his staff, with a new staff that he formed in just 2 weeks. Most of them comprised of local managers, local Brazilian physios and scouts. So it was a team that he really hadn't worked with him before. And he started to coach right inside the beginning of the season. And Brazil has a calendar which is absolutely bonkers because you have the Estaduals, who are the regional championships that supporters need to win because it's taking the piss out of your rivals right there. Then you go to the National League, which like is 40 matches a year. Then you have the continental competitions where you have to play in Brazil one day, Colombia the next. Then you have to move to Argentina. Then you go to Chile. So they're basically like if continental competitions in Europe was people playing in Wolves and then playing in Russia all the time. And things didn't work out. Flamengo, the culture of the club was different to the one he was used to in Corinthians. There were more money there to spend, but the players had big egos. And with Vitor Pereira, you cannot have a big ego because it's me or you. And in the end, the board decided to support the players instead of a manager, which happens a lot in South America. That's why they don't have very stable projects on the long run. And then he decided to come back to Portugal, and he took that sabbatical year that he had promised to his family. Things went bad with Corinthians supporters, as it was expected, because they believed the version when he said he would leave. They thought it was for the family. Then 2 weeks later, he's at Flamengo, which one is Corinthians' greatest rivals. So that didn't turn out very well for him. But he also told that he learned from his past mistakes, and the next time he would accept an offer, he would have to be very clear about what the offer was all about. Then came the possibility to go to Saudi Arabia again to give him some more money, which he accepted, like many. And basically, he always told the press and told everyone who wanted to hear that his main purpose was to coach in the Premier League. But it could not be any job. He wanted to understand the project, and its great ambition is to be eventually someday Portuguese national coach as well, return to Portugal in that capacity. But before, he wants to try the Premier League, eventually even Spanish football, because there are two realities that he's very interested in, especially in tactical terms and in terms of atmosphere and club culture. So basically, he had the possibility to go to Everton, as everybody knows. Then Everton went for Frank Lampard. And then he had other offers from clubs from the Championship as well. Eventually, even some of the clubs in the Premier League, but he didn't like the project. And then he ended up with this possibility of going to the Molino, and he accepted it. At least it seems that he has accepted it. And let's
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Right, Lee Lutton's offered a great question, Miguel. There's not really been much in the media about how this is going to look, but Lee Lutton has asked, what is Vitor's backroom staff like? Nuno had great staff behind him that created unity within the club.
Yeah, it's the same, and that's why the experience in Flamengo finished that bad, because he has been working with the same people for over a decade now. So they know each other very well. They share the same principles, they share the same philosophy, and they have their tasks really defined. So Vitor is the type of manager that likes to coach. He likes to be very interventive in the tactical terms, in the training ground. He's not a guy to stay behind the desk taking decisions. He likes to understand the players, get to know them better. But that thing takes time. And it's also important that during that process, to have a staff around you that passes you the right information, so you understand better if a certain player is more prone to have a behavior of being more disciplined or ill-disciplined, or be more motivated with certain matches than others. If one player is more with his mind already trying to move out, or if he has connection and has the ambition to triumph in the club they had at that moment. So that backroom staff identity is part of his football culture as well. He grew up with it because Porto has a great tactical backbone structure. That's why Nuno has it as well, because Nuno played for Porto for many years during the Mourinho years at the beginning of the 2000s. So it's also a very common trait in Portuguese football. And as you see, Mourinho's, even Amorim's, and other managers that have moved around, they always try to move with their staff. I remember now when Amorim moved to Man United, there was a possibility of leaving staff behind because Man United didn't want to pay the wages for the staff. And he said, without my staff, I'm not going, because we are one and we know what we need to do. And Vitor Pereira is much similar to that.
Who comes out looking better in their Brazilian managerial spells, Vitor or Bruno Lage?
I think Vitor, because basically Bruno Lage had a huge opportunity to win the league with Botafogo. They had a huge investment there when John Textor bought the club. Really ambition to do what Arthur Jorge did this year, which is to win the Brasileirão and then to be very competitive in the Libertadores. And when he got the possibility to be that man, he flunked it. He wasn't able to cope with the pressure. Even he stated afterwards that the Brazilian press is very aggressive. Brazilian supporters are very, very aggressive in the bad term, and not in demanding wise, but insulting wise. So basically, Lage wasn't able to lead with that situation. Then he preferred to come back to Portugal. But Vitor Pereira he won the supporters, and he even won the press. He had his rants because he has his character, but at the same time they respected that. They prefer a more straightforward guy who tried to tell them the things that he believed, instead of a character like Lage who always tries to say things that people want to hear. And I think you also had the experience that at Molino with him. And Vitor Pereira will tell you that if you're not playing well, he will be the first guy to say, we're playing shit, really, and we need to improve this and we need to improve that, and it's on me. But the players have to step up a little bit, and the supporters need to be supportive. And he will be able to say those things because that's the only thing he has done all over his career. And characters like Lage always want to have a more, I would say, woke speech. Everything is good, everything is rainbow, and we just need to be positive. And in football, we know that doesn't work a lot of the times.
He's muted himself again the third time today.
I'm not even a rookie. It's just embarrassing. It's Gary O'Neill levels.
10 years this.
Yeah. 123 North Street with a statement. You must have Miguel on. We're going to try and get Miguel signed up to a contract on the Fancast before Wolves announce Vitor Pereira. What are the sort of dissimilarities between Bruno and Vitor in regards to tactical side?
Well, basically, all Portuguese managers work the same way tactically. There's not a blueprint. When you see Dutch managers, you see, okay, we're always going to play 4-3-3. We're always going to play with this sort of player, that. In terms of Portuguese managerial style, it's not about the tactics, but the dynamics. There's a lot of idea of control, having the ball, protect yourself with the ball, not running around like German managers who like to press, and they don't mind losing the ball if we recover the ball quickly and we are fit enough to do that. But the Portuguese manager style is more focused on getting the ball as much as you can, touching the ball, moving the play around, but always have the ability to create the last pass, to explore the wings. And I think this is one of the similar traits that Bruno can have with Victor. But I think Victor is more focused than Bruno in the maximum control, having huge possessions of the ball, but not in a defensive wise mindset. I don't want to have the ball for the sake of it. I want to have the ball because I want to create chances, and sometimes I need to wait until the right moment comes to give the last pass. And the players cannot get on their nerves if they don't find the space. They have to be quiet. They have to be easy on the foot. But at the same time, it's not for me to defend myself with the ball like other managers do. And he always sets one of the good examples of controlling matches with the ball, but at the same time being direct, is the Zerbi Brighton. He was a big fan of that, because he believed that there were teams that knew how to play the ball from the back, but with speed and always searching for the right pass at the right moment. If they had to spend 2-3 minutes just touching the ball between them until they found the right moment, they would. And that's one of the things that he likes the most.
Neil White with a question, which I'm sure you can find the answer in your book, Miguel. Sorry, wrong one. How come Portugal produces great players and managers? You need to get the book. It's all in there. Bring them in that horizon. That was one of the sort of questions that I wanted to lead upon earlier, because you talked about how he doesn't like having the ball just for the sake of it. Mm-hmm. One of the key things that Vítor really needs to jump on quickly is keeping the goals landing in our net. And his average stat for goals conceded per game in his managerial career is 1.1, which would be massively influential to where we are as a team in the Premier League at the moment. But you mentioned that he's not really rigid as such. He likes to move the ball in different areas of the pitch whilst having an option on maybe the other side to quickly change.
Yeah. Basically, that's the idea. Create spaces by moving the ball, not just having the ball, but being able to move the goal. If you go right, then you have a player open on your left, then you create the space, then you put the ball on the player that's on the left, then you attack the goal. And basically, the way that he plays is that the ball is always the center of his mindset. It's not just about the passes, it's also about taking the right shots at the right time. If you need to shot from outside the area, do it. If you need to enter the area and shot from within the area, depends on the opponents as well. If you're going to play with a team that plays high pressing, then you know you can go on the counter, and you have space to take advantage of. If you're going to play against a side that sits really deep, then you have to be patient and touch the ball. He's not very rigid. He understands the dynamics of the game. But like you said, it's very important for him not to concede, not to suffer goals. And that's why he also demands from the team to defend and attack all together. It's not like different areas of the pitch that the defenders go just up there and then they don't move and don't get mixed with the midfield, and the midfielders don't mix with the forwards. It's all compact. So the forwards need to go up and down the wing, and the players from the defensive side need to step up, also help with creating lines of space, give good passes to the midfielders, and create always those options. And let's see with the squad that Wolves has now, they have some players who are able to do that or not.
Massively. That's one of the things that I think someone asked earlier about how long do you think it'll take for Vítor to actually implement his style of play. I just want to read off some midfielders that have played for him during his managerial career. Obviously, we've already mentioned João Moutinho, Ivan Rakitic, Mesut Ozil, Oscar at Shanghai. You got James Rodriguez. He's had some exceptional players to carry out that philosophy of being in control and intelligent with the ball. Is that something that you expect him to be able to implement quickly based on the level of players that Wolves have?
Well, it's less about the level of the players and more about the time. And obviously, to enter a project during mid-season, it's not the same as starting from June or July, start working with the team. And of course, you mentioned Moutinho. Moutinho is the perfect Vitor Pereira player. And Moutinho grew up exponentially under Vitor Pereira, because basically he started his career as a number 10, really, Moutinho, when he was playing at Sporting, and even when he moved to Porto. And then he was reconverted as an all-round number 8, but with the ability to dictate the game. And those are the sort of players that he really likes, and the players that he likes to develop, the more intelligent players in the way they read the game, not just about the passes, but the positioning, and also to see the dynamics within the team. And for that, of course, you need time. And the great upset by appointing Vítor now is that despite the next match against Leicester, who is a direct rival right now in the league table, then you have very tough matches to play with against sides that are in the upper part of the league table. And that will be difficult for him to manage if he wants to implement right now a lot of tactical changes. So he is a stubborn guy, so he will want to play from the beginning his way, and that can bring some issues with the selection of the squad, still trying to find the right players for the way he wants to interpret the game, because he has been a manager that since day one always preferred to start the seasons instead of entering in mid-season. And probably if he's ready to jump ship now, is because he believes he can do that. And he believes that Wolves is the great chance that he always worked for to be in the Premier League. But he's a manager with concepts of that you need to have players understanding. And that's why I mentioned before, with a squad with so many South American and Portuguese players right now, he probably understands that those players will be able to catch the way he wants the team to play faster than others. So you'll probably see some players will be easy to adapt to what he wants to implement, and others will take more time to develop.
How do you think he'll use João Gomez? Because we've seen it under Gary O'Neill's madness, where he was played on as the right-hand side of a front three for some mental reason. And João Gomez for us has done his best work as a 6 for me. Where do you see him playing the 6 there, or do you think he can push him forward to more of an 8?
No, I can see him playing as a 6, and for him the 6 position is key. For instance, if Ruben Neves was still a player at Molino, he would be the perfect fit within the Vitor Pereira idea of having a 6, a guy that could move the ball from one side to the other with just a long pass, but at the same time will be able to dictate tempo. So I think with João, he will find it will be more focused on having, for instance, Andre playing as an 8 and João playing as a 6.
Interesting. Miguel, you may tell me if I'm wrong. I was looking at the very informative website Transfer Market, and Neil White has asked, did Hulk not play with Vítor at Porto?
Yeah,
Transfer Market tells me that Hulk is the only player to have played under Vítor at 2 different clubs.
Yeah, at Shanghai and at Porto before, yeah.
How does he like his strikers?
Fast, and able to move between positions. He's not the kind of guy that goes for a number 9 that stays in the box. He likes the players to be very mobile between the lines, very fast, able to diagonal between the wings and the center. So I'm curious to see what he's going to do with Strand Larsen, which is a more classic 9 in that sense. He always liked more the profile players that could create space for others and just moving around, interchanging with the guys playing on the left and appeared on the right. And Ulk is that sort of player, and he thrived under him because of that as well. Because when Falcao left, and Falcao was the classic number 9, one of the top number 9s that we had over the past 15 years, a lot of the times he played with Ulk as centre forward in the 9 position, because he was a guy that was moving all around the pitch. So sometimes he was playing at 9, then he would appear on the wing, then he would appear in the midfield trying to create space. So those sorts of players are the ones that are more interesting to him.
Be interesting to see how this fares. Stu, looking at some of the stats there, you can see on the screen with Vitor's games coach and his points per game ratio. It's very impressive. Obviously, he's had a bit of a sticky spell with 1860 Munich, which Miguel said didn't go great. I think he was, you say he was conned by the club, Miguel?
He told in an interview that when he arrived at the training pitch for the first session, he wanted to quit because he said they are really bad. They really are. And I was promised players that had the level to play eventually at the Bundesliga, but these guys are not worthy of the second Bundesliga. So he was really in shock. And obviously at the time we were talking about, I think it was 2014, there was still not that much video analysis on football. So he probably accepted the job more based on the opinion of others. And then he said he wouldn't do that again and actually he was right, because 1860 Munich really was relegated that season from the second Bundesliga to the third, and they have been in the third since then. So they were really bad.
What happened in his spell at Fenerbahce, particularly the second time around? Because I was speaking to a Fenerbahce fan, and he said it went massively wrong there, and Fenerbahce was lucky to avoid relegation in that second spell.
Yeah. I think the first time he was there, he ended up second in the league behind Galatasaray, which was a good achievement, taking consideration that Fenerbahce usually is the third club regarding budget. But I think in the second stage, it was a more difficult connection with the players that were in the team, that were not the same squad that he had inherited in the first time. And at the same time, there was a more lack of investment than he had faced in the first. And he was more runty. He picked up fights with the board. He picked up fights with several key players, with the fans. So it didn't end up well for him. And sometimes that's what you get with Victor. You can get the good, but you also get the bad. And when there's the bad, then there's the rants, then there's the character. The Mourinho-like persona can appear sometimes, with less ego than Mourinho, of course, but more focus on his values, like I said before, more focus on the way he sees how the game should be played, how the players behave, how the club needs to be respectful of all the promises they made him when they were signed. So basically, after that, the experience went downwards and they had to terminate the contract, I think in February. Eventually, Fenerbahce, of course, wasn't relegated. And then he moved to Brazil to search for sunnier weather.
It's nice for some to get those sunnier jobs across the continent. In a few bits that I've come across on the internet, he's quite well known for his player development, actually bringing through players from the academy. It'd be interesting to see if he's able to bring any players through from the Wolves Academy, through, because there hasn't really been much gold and diamonds in recent years, has there?
I mean, that was my first. As soon as you started going down this path, I thought, who is this going to be here? Because when we've all the talk of the academy, you only go back 5 years when we had even Bright. I mean, Bright went in the championship and that game at Man City where anything could have happened. He could have been a superstar, and it all dropped off. And he was the kind of the shining star in that group of players. And we haven't really had anyone since step up. And obviously, we had the issues with. I mean, Shuami might come good eventually, but you look at the ones who were thrown in last year because we had no one else, and it was just literally a young body up front. Or in midfield in his case. And you think, well, they're clearly nowhere near ready. But you look, if it's about ethics, if it's about work ethic, and if it's about behaving yourself and working hard, you know what? It sounds like Hwang's his wet dream, and Hwang Hee-chan could be back. I don't. This sounds mental to considering how bad he's been since the Asian Cup, but what Miguel said, he likes players who drift in positions up front, who runs his heart out, which he used to do before he got disillusioned as well. And if you can get Hwang fit, I think that's where this is going to be. Because you look at even maybe Bellegarde. I know everyone hates Bellegarde for some reason, but I still think he's better played in the middle rather than just shunted out wide. I think we've got players there, young players, not so much in the academy, just young players who haven't really had a chance. Maybe even Tommy Doyle. Maybe Tommy Doyle gets a chance. But I think that's what this is. From what the last hour is kind of what Miguel's told us, that there's hope again. And these players who've been kind of, remember what he said, was it last week or the week before, when he said these players are not knowing effectively what was said at Bournemouth before he was appointed there, that the players weren't good enough. Yeah, these players are good enough. And some of them haven't even had a chance this season, really. And they're still young. They're still, when you look at the average age of our squad, there's still quite a lot of them under 24, 25. So I'm quite optimistic now.
Which I think could be a key thing for the new head coach, is that he's got a youngish squad who, if I was to, if I'd lay the list of players down, there isn't really a player that stands out in having an ego above their ability, Stu. Obviously, Matthias Cunha's had a bit of an amazing November, and it's gone a bit off script since the Fulham away game, but there's still a squad there. I think Vítor could easily mould into the way that he wants to play. It's just the problem is we've got 22 games left, and results probably are more important than performances currently. Steeway89 does this every episode. I try and play a decent host. If I'm not muting myself, he's coming out with comments like this. Vitor Pereira hasn't been announced yet. He's seen Bellegarde and Hwang and thought, fuck this. I mean, I almost want to concentrate on comments like that. Stu, have you got any more questions for Miguel before we wrap up the show? Because without getting way too ahead of ourselves, if he can keep us up, the sky's the limit for this coach for me, especially if we have got Uncle George Mendes back on side.
I mean, the glaring one is, as always, the goalkeeping situation. Obviously, Jose Sá's the better keeper for me, and always will be. Sam Johnson potentially better with his feet, but has he got a style of goalkeeper that he likes to play with, or is it, as you said, like it depends on where he is?
There wasn't really any goalkeepers that stood out when I looked on his transfer market. The one notable goalkeeper was Stefan Ortega.
Yeah, it depends. For instance, Elton was the Brazilian goalkeeper that also had at the time, was good on his feet, but he was very prone error, for instance. And I think what he really likes to keep is to stop balls, really. And after that, if he can comply with that,
it's genius. Asking a goalkeeper just to save the ball. Anything else is genius. I love him.
And I think Jose will be his first stand-in goalkeeper, because basically it's a goalkeeper that he knows really from every experience that he had in Portugal. So basically, I think he will be his number one choice, even if he's not good with his feet, because he never was, and we all know him for that. But at the same time, he's a good stopper, and I think for Vítor it will be very important, like Dan said before, to get results. And probably to get results, you need to have a keeper that stops balls that are coming from you, from all over the world, until you get your team set up right the way you do. And like Dan was saying before, I don't know deep the youth academy at Wolves, but I know some of the players who are under 24, and those are the players that he likes to work with, because they are very open to know more about the game, to develop. They're not established players. They are players who are eager to learn. And if they are eager to learn, then there will be the perfect players for a guy that really wants to teach, because in a sense, he's a teacher of football. And with him, you're not going to play because you're the best mate of the manager. You're going to play because you're the guy that has learned his lesson in training and then apply it on the field.
Time is running away for us. I did tell Miguel we were trying to do 45 minutes, but we're just over an hour now. I'm going to quickly cut it short after a couple more questions. How does he what's his relationships like with his captains during his coach career? He recently had Romain Saïs, who's still well adored at Wolves recently at Al Shabab.
Yeah, of course. It's like with the backroom staff. He really understands the need to have players that are the shepherd, basically, of the youth players that they have in the squad. And Moutinho, once again, is the perfect example because he was captain for Porto under him. And he was the guy that despite not still being very young at the time, he played the role of captain often, and he had the ability to command and to be his voice on the pitch. I think he looks for the club captain as the voice of the manager during matches, not just for being the eldest guy in the squad, but to be the guy that better understands what he wants to pass through to the other players.
Interesting. It's going to be an exciting... he hasn't even been announced. It needs to be announced. I'm going to tweet Wolves in a minute saying you need to announce him, otherwise I'm chucking my season ticket away. Everyone's thanking you for your insight tonight, Miguel. We really appreciate you having given us your time. Thank you, Miguel, for your time. As 123 North Street saying, yes, Dan, Stu, excellent. Be on the BBC next. Stu's more likely to work for the BBC, not me. No. Thanks everyone for joining myself, Stu, and the amazing Miguel Pereira on tonight's Wolves Fancast show. Hopefully there'll be an announcement in the next day away, if not very first thing in the morning. We'll be back on Friday evening to preview the weekend's tie away at Leicester. But until then, up the Wolves.